Good morning, everyone. May I have your kind attention, please? Since we are running late, I think we should start the session now. I hope everyone is settled. Okay. So a very good morning to everyone again. Our MC is not here today, so I am replacing her. So before we start today's session, I would like to play the message we have from our Minister, Meenakshi Lekhi. She is the Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture of India. And she has been a very supportive person during our entire journey of this festival, and she has been very much supportive to our Northeast. So whenever we have a festival in Delhi, a Northeast festival or any kind of festival, she has been part of it, and she has shown much love and support to our community. Before we begin the session, let us listen to her message.
Namaskar. It is heartening to know that IMASI, the Maharaj Kumari Binodini Devi Foundation of Manipur, is organizing the Listener Festival of Oral Literature, the unique initiative that focuses on preserving the non-text and pre-text traditions and literature of Northeast will bring to light the intangible cultural heritage of the region. Culture plays an important role in the development of any nation. It represents a set of shared values, attitudes, goals, and practices. A country as diverse as India is symbolized by the plurality of its culture. The plurality and multiplicity of the Indian culture is evident to the whole world, as India has one of the world's largest collections of songs, music, dance, theatre, folk traditions, performing arts, rites and rituals, languages, dialects, paintings, and writings that are collectively known as the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Intangible cultural heritage of any nation is tantamount to the soul of its civilization, people, and history. It is imperative that we preserve our intangible heritage for the coming generations. I'm confident that the initiative undertaken by the IMASI Foundation will further help in promoting and preserving our heritage. My best wishes are to the members of the IMASI Foundation and all the participants for a successful oral literature festival. Jai Hind.
As our minister mentioned, how in our IMASI Foundation's festival is going to help generations in future, but this would not have been possible without our support from CIAL, from UNESCO, from Shobna and her team. This wouldn't have been possible. So let's move on to our first session for today. The session is on developing collaborative scholarship on language and culture. Our panelists will be our festival director, L. Swami Roy, and Ezekiel Delamini, UNESCO, and yes, so I would like to call upon Mr. L. Swami Roy first to start the session.
Yeah. It's okay? Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Renuka. Good morning. This is the second panel organized by CIIL, and like the previous one on digital resources, this one on collaborative scholarship is also personally very close to my heart, and also for IMASI Foundation. How do we work with other people's ideas? How do we promote and project our ideas? How do we frame them? Is one of the biggest challenges that I've found working on various projects here. And to collaborate with a national leader like the CIIL, my friend Umarani Papuswamy and Alindra Brahma, it's been a tremendous opportunity, and I hope to, despite our discussions this morning, I hope to build on this first edition of a festival. I apologize for any kind of quirks and lateness and all that. It's always difficult the very first day of any festival when things, and so I need to thank my coordinators, Abo and Renuka, and in absentia, Lesembi, who's handling our PR. She's gone to get our Pandwani players. So yesterday, as happens in all festivals, a lot of things happen outside the events, which are just as important and interesting as the ones that are happening in the event. Yesterday we had 3 amazing performances, totally amazing. Shamkan Hai's Wari Liba, Pandwani's story of killing of Kitchak by Dushan Dwivedi, and then, most special of all, we had Guru Sangyu Sang Pongener sing his Ao songs yesterday. This is a moment of chicken skin for me. I mean, it was so deeply authentic. Authentic being a very problematic word also, I know, but I just kind of felt that. And we would not be here today if Hezekiel Dlamini and UNESCO had not supported us, first in spirit and then actively participating in the Listener starting last year with a pre-launch at UNESCO in New Delhi. So yesterday, we convened privately and we had a very interesting conversation and things moved very nicely. And I just want to start this by presenting a book. This is a book that my friend Lalam Hangshing, who's also on the advisory council of Imasi Foundation, published. It was previously, the first edition was published by his mother, who actually compiled this dictionary. It's called School Chapang Dictionary. It's an English Thado Kuki dictionary. So his mother had compiled this and was the first Thado dictionary. And I went to his house one day and going through his father's books, I saw this and I said, what is this? He says, oh, it's a dictionary my mother published. How many copies do you have? Can I have one? We have only 2 copies left. I said, then you must republish it. This is the best thing you can do in memory of your mom. So we worked together, and it's quite complicated inside, as dictionary is the layout. I wasn't sure if the OCR method would actually work to get it into the thing because of all the strange words over here. And this is certain, I'm not sure if it has diacritical marks, but so we decided to scan it and make this dictionary. So now we printed 1,000 copies, 800 copies went like that. The government of Kohima, in Nagaland, Kohima bought, I think, 500 copies for the Kuki communities. So when we collaborate on scholarship, we need things like this. We need books that form the bridge between languages. How are we going to collaborate if we don't have some of these tools with us? So with pleasure, on behalf of my friend, Lalam Hangshing, who cannot be here because he had to go to Indore, where he got his first grandchild yesterday. So it's a very happy occasion for him, so he can't be here with us. But I would like to first present this to David Peterson and Shobana and to Umarani, because these 3 institutions, we have discussed in so many ways of how to get this online, how to get universal access for this. And this is what we want at Imasi Foundation, and this is what Lalam Hangshing wants, is not about copyright. We want to get this out to people who can use it, who will want to use it. So without further ado, David, here we go. Thank you. Thank you, Shobana.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So much. Could I say
Yes.
a word about this? So what we will do with this is we have an existing Thadao collection in Corso, and after we get permission from the author, we will include all of this material as PDF, but maybe we can OCR, and then there's a Pautang Haukip is working on a Tadao dictionary right now. He could then use these and give credit to this scholar for the items that he's using. So collaborative scholarship.
Collaborative scholarship. And tomorrow we have a session called Pena Pamsak, which is going to be the balladeer's performance, and it'll be in Aribalone. And even for Aribalone, now that Pautang Haukip's efforts in the dictionary making, he'll be connecting with Mr. Sangsheng's earlier efforts. Even for Aribalone, we would like to build a new dictionary of Aribalone. The basic will be the one that Pandit Ciil Chandra produced in the 1960s. But the first Aribalone dictionary, first Manipuri dictionary, was in 1844, published by Maharaja Narsingh and Colonel Grant. So there have been 3 iterations of Aribalone dictionaries, and we need to put this together. And so the collaborative scholarship can also take within the community across generations. So all this collaborative scholarship love affair that I've had by working with you here, we've done our programs in Kentucky together, we've sat together in New York working on books together. The main thing that I've found in a place like Manipur, and by extension also true of Northeast India in general, is that our scholarship is largely insular and inward-looking because of the difficulty of getting here and working here for many different reasons. A lot of collaborative scholarship is missing in Manipur. And as the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein said, if you know only your language, you don't even know your language. It's only when 2 people meet and say, I'm a Manipuri, and what are you? And then you say, Umar, and you say, I'm Tamil. That is the time when we define and give names to ourselves. For this reason, most religions don't even have a name, old religions. Most people in the world don't even have a name for themselves. They say, who am I? What is this question? I'm me. There's no need for a name until you meet someone else. That is when you have to decide, who am I? And how am I different from this person? Or who is this person? And so that meeting of minds is the first spark of a collaboration of building knowledge. We have a fair amount of scholarship, especially since 1949, when Manipur became part of India. We have a fair amount of scholarship about the Vaishnav roots, the Indian roots of Manipuri civilization. And I use the word Manipuri civilization very carefully and advisedly. The great scholar N. Tombi Singh, brother of N. Ciil Chandra, he once said to my mother, and she told me this, I didn't hear it from him, he said, Manipur is not a state. Manipur is not a culture. Manipur is not a kingdom. Manipur is a civilization. And this came to me, although I did not, I think, include it in my book, but when I was writing a book on mythology for children that came out last year, it's called And That Is Why. It's a puffin book, Manipuri Myths Retold. Then the question became like, how did Manipur develop a mythology? A very small place like Manipur. When France doesn't really have a mythology, or Germany doesn't really, E.M. Forster famously said, "We English don't even have a mythology. We only have fairies and pixies." And so, of course, the love affair that England has had with classical Greek literature is very well known. That's why they love Greek mythology. But how did Manipur have mythology? When I published this, people interviewed me and said, "Where does it come from?" And the answer was first, in short, "I don't know. I've asked around. I don't know." We even produced an art form that I had to name Subika because it came from the illustrated manuscripts called Subika. When I talked to my friend Saryu Doshi, the grande dame of Indian art history, coming out of Ann Arbor, and she said, "We don't know where this art form comes from. Is it Indian art? Some of it looks like it. Is it Burmese art? Some of it looks like it." Someone said to me, "It looks a bit like the murals at Bagan." Not really. So we don't know this. Where did it come from? If we want to find out where Manipuri mythology comes from, which I've kind of framed and said there is a mythology, because there's no such thing as an Indian mythology. There's a Hindu mythology. There's a Buddhist mythology, or Islamic mythology, or Gujarati mythology, for instance. But Manipuri mythology, like most mythologies, are largely an aspect of worship, of religion. So if you want to understand what Manipuri religion is, and this evening we are going to Payeng to see the Lai Harauba, the Payeng Harauba. You're actually going to see the kind of oral literature we've been presenting over here in situ, being performed in a place, not a theater, in front of the shrine, a real act of worship. You'll see all the villagers come there. You'll see the religion happening. The stories that I wrote, some of them are already going to be performed at the Payeng Harauba. There's a story about the Chakpa tradition, to which Payeng belongs, in my book as well. But the only thing I've done is I've kind of framed what I found here. But to understand what the Chakpa tradition means, and the story of how fire came to Andro village, or the black pudding that we had for lunch yesterday, where did that black rice come from? We have a mention of it in the manuscript called Travels of Cryrto. That chahao, black rice, is called Cryrtho chahao. It is a rice, an heirloom rice, that's probably, if we go by the Chaitral Kumbhaba records, 2,000 years old. But what is the story of Cryrtho, the warrior prince, who brought this black rice to Manipur? We have not heard the story from the other side, from the Shan kingdom, from the Shan storytellers and historical records. Until then, we will really not know the story of Cryrtho and the black rice. So we need collaborative scholarship with Burma, with Myanmar. We have border problems, we have civil unrest here, nationalist movements that create all sorts of problems. So the development of Manipuri civilizational characteristics from the Vaishnava Hindu side is much better developed because we've been supported by the government of India. We have the various institutions having branches over here and offices. The funding comes from the government. So there's been a lot of encouragement over here. But we don't have funding to bring Burmese scholarship here. Who do we go to? We can't even cross the border. The militia are there. People are being killed over here and over there. A lot over there right now. So how are we going to build collaborative scholarship? Because, you see, geography is our destiny. Where we are now, sitting here, I was at a literature event one time, and one of the major spokespeople from the Northeast on national media, we were talking about Eastern Himalaya. And I said, actually, where Manipur is and where most of the Northeast India is not Himalayan. That's the misconception. So until we have this kind of collaborative scholarship, no one will know that we are actually not. Eastern Himalaya only goes up to the Arunachal Pradesh and Bhutan. This range that comes from that region where the Brahmaputra, the Changpo becomes the Brahmaputra and doglegs into Assam, the range that we're sitting in right now are part of the Yoma. It's a different geological tectonic movement. It is not the Himalayan plate. This is called the Burma plate. All the cultural people, all the historians, all they had to do was to pick up the phone and talk to a geologist. Geologists know this. These two plates actually ram into each other, and that corner where they ram together is called the Bishing Gap, and that is where Arunachal and China meet. So we are sitting here on the mountain ranges created by this ramming of two plates. It buckles. It rose up mountains. We are about 2,500 feet. The highest hills must be what, 10, 11,000 in Manipur? These are the ranges that are like fingers that flow, that go south, and rivers flow between the fingers. The finger, so you have the Chindwin River, the Irrawaddy River, the Salween River. Mekong goes after that side. Brahmaputra comes this way. So this is our destiny, which means that this place is sitting on the watershed of South Asia and Southeast Asia. To understand this, we need Southeast Asian scholarship to come to us, or we to go to Southeast Asian scholarship, in as much as we go to Indian scholarship. My name, L. Somi Roy. The Roy comes from Bengal. My family are scribes from my father's side. They brought Hinduism here from Bengal. Today we call Muslims from Bengal Pangal. That's a corruption of Bengal. We call Indians from the mainland Mayang. Mayang was a name for the region just next to us. In those days, we had no idea where Mysore was or where Gujarat was, because our Weltanschauung, if you like my academic German word, the worldview here is very limited over here. We have names for China. We have names for, we call them Kagi. I was telling Kagembam James, who wrote this article, I said, your name must mean that you must be Chinese, because Kagi is China, Yunnan, actually. We didn't know China in Beijing, we only knew Yunnan. So you have Takeo, you have Tekhao, you have the different names over here. So even the names of civilizations where we have indicate where the scholarship needs to come from, especially Southeast Asia. This is a big blank in scholarship right now. And I think, David, you can touch upon that. So I'm very interested in juxtapositional, collaborative, comparative scholarship, because that's the only way that we can actually increase our scholarship of and understanding of Manipur. That Manipuris themselves can understand Manipur better only by talking to other people, only by collaborating with other people. So Imasi Foundation will always be passionately in the forefront of bringing scholarship here from outside regions and cultures. We want the meeting of different minds, and only then does knowledge get created. Thank you very much.
Next, I would like to call upon Mr. Ciil from UNESCO to the panel.
Good morning again. It's great again to have an opportunity to share some thoughts. I don't know if I'll address a lot of the concerns that Somi raised, because I think there are other people among us who can perhaps address them more directly. But let me just share my thoughts from the UN perspective. From the UN perspective, I think the growth of the festival can benefit from multi-stakeholder partnerships. What do I mean by multi-stakeholder partnerships? I mean, let's get more state and non-state support. For us, it's important. In other words, academia. The role of your MPs is very important in this regard, and they are already doing a lot of work, I can tell you that. We get a lot of questions as UNESCO to respond to or contribute to, because the relevant ministries or ministers have been asked to respond. That brings visibility to the work you're doing on indigenous languages in this region. So that's an example of a state actor. There are others. Non-state actors, academia, civil society are also very important from our point of view. Because when you have an initiative that contributes to human development, you must be seen to be inclusive. Therefore, multi-stakeholder partnerships are important in that regard. So including community-based organizations, their representatives, or including groups such as women groups, youth groups, for us is important. I think I can highlight Ciil as a very good example of an academic partner that is already here. And I think there's a lot that we can do through them to connect other academic partners. UNESCO also has a network of UNESCO chairs, which Ciil actually is also connected to. This is not an Indian network, it's a global network. It is obviously a network that comprises professors in this field. We also have chairs in other fields, but I'm just going to speak about IL. That enjoy a lot of institutional support from their institutions, their universities, their research institutions, which means that they can bring some of the collaboration that Somi ended with, that is interregional or cross-border collaboration, that some of that can come. Some of that can come, but there is a big but. There is a big but. The but is we have to show, first of all, the visibility and the impact of the festival, of the listener movement, let me put it like that. UNESCO chairs are academic people, professors and researchers, but they very much work towards development goals. That's why they are part of a UN network, of course. They are not just purely doing it for research, for just purely academic purposes only, but it's to contribute also to the knowledge base and knowledge sharing of humanity. And information access, of course, in this particular field. So they do inform policy. They do research and they do inform policy, and therefore they are very much concerned with development issues in the field of indigenous languages. I was also going to not emphasize but highlight the importance of associating with the national institution that government has designated for that particular for this particular area. This particular area for us being indigenous languages and intangible cultural heritage. In this regard, there are a number of institutions in India, but for us, when I say us, I mean UNESCO. As I stand today, it would be IGNCA, but there are others. There are other institutions that the Ministry of Culture has designated to play a national role. It is, again, it helps to bring visibility to right people, engage, for instance, the government authorities on the issues that we want to follow up. After the festival, I suppose there will be activities that one need following up. So it does help. But it also helps to have perhaps better support for future festivals. I believe if you work closely with the government, especially in India, it helps a lot. Again, I'm coming back to visibility. Visibility comes in many forms. I think publications certainly serve that purpose. There are other forms of visibility. I think Somi is a star when it comes to that, so I don't need to say anything. He already knows more than I do in making the festival visible. Impact and scale and sustainability obviously will come along as the visibility also grows. From our standpoint also, numbers and diversity of beneficiaries, or all of those who are being reached, is very important. Here I'm talking about women, talking about young people, I'm talking about minorities. We know minorities, we define them in various terms or in various ways. Reach to minorities is very important from our standpoint. In other words, when we argue for further UN, UNESCO involvement, this evidence or these numbers need to be shown. That's basically what I'm saying there. Clear outcomes and deliverables, I think this has been mentioned, because that obviously shows value addition of the festival. One of the quickest way to kill any activity is to make people feel we're doing for the sake of doing it. That doesn't fly with even the smallest donor that we can talk to. They want to see that there is a good reason why it has to continue to be organized and to be supported. I was going to say also, aligning the listener movement with the objectives or the agenda of the government is also a good thing. You know, I've seen small initiatives grow because, especially here in India, I've been in India since 2019, so just about 3 years, over 3 years. I've seen some small initiatives grow because in this country, we are very creative in linking up initiatives with money, let me put it like that. And I've seen people just doing it now with G20, for instance. We have, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there is what we call the Radio Festival. Started by a small NGO. And each year, they organize it every year. They're just creative in linking it with the Sustainable Development Goals, government programs, and now G20. And as a result, they are kind of growing. That's my view, at least, that they're growing in prominence. They've attracted the Asia Broadcasting Union to join this year. So talk about starting small, going national, and going regional. This has happened within the period of about 3 years. I'm just sharing that experience as perhaps something that can be discussed. All my points are subject to discussion. They are not fit for all. Some people will feel some things would work for the listener movements. Others would feel it wouldn't work. And I truly accept those points of view. And then, of course, I would end with the identification and reaching out to donor friends. Now, I don't know about your experiences. My experience is that donors need to understand you and maybe even go beyond understanding you, like you, to be able to even buy into your idea. I don't know your experience. That's my legal experience, especially here in India. You know, in Africa, I come from Africa. I come from a small country in southern Africa called Swaziland. In Swaziland, our government just asks any donor that is willing, and they come and help. And NGOs don't do much contribution to society in Swaziland. It's a very weak NGO movement in Swaziland. But when you go to other countries, go to Kenya, go to Uganda, you find that really NGOs are in the forefront of supporting community development. And when I interacted with them, I was at that time working in East Africa, I found that they benefited a lot from sympathy. You know, donors were very sympathetic to their cause and the people they target and so on. I don't see that in India. Quite honestly, donors think India has got money. I don't know your experience, that's my experience. Donors think India is rich. So you have to convince donors that this is important, it's in line with the government, and indeed they can trust you with their dollar. That's where the liking comes in, because they must trust that you'll deliver with their dollar. But they align themselves very, very, very closely with government objectives here in India, as opposed to Africa. I find NGOs and donors in Africa going completely against the government line. Not so here. So those are my experiences. Maybe they help, maybe they don't help. But as I said, we can discuss and refine them. Thank you.
Mr. Galamini. I think you have given us enough information regarding the scholarship and collaboration we can do with Ciil, and thank you for sharing your experience also. Next, I would like to call upon Mr. David Peterson, Associate Professor of Linguistics, Dartmouth College, to head the panel.
Obviously, we have very different perspectives on this panel, and so I'm going to maybe bring you down to a more micro level and talk about capacity building in the academy and in the community. And my primary experience is Bangladesh, and I think maybe it'll be useful to you here in India. You're familiar with the Indian situation, and it's actually very different in Bangladesh, or at least it historically was very different in Bangladesh. So first of all, funding acknowledgements. So I first went to Bangladesh in 1999. In the late 90s, I was finishing my PhD, and I had begun to work with refugee communities in the US on languages from Western Myanmar, and of course, they're very closely related languages up here in Manipur, and also in southeastern Bangladesh. And so at the end of my PhD, I was looking for what my next research project was going to be, and I wanted to continue working with these languages. And so I thought it would be possible to go to Bangladesh. At that point, Manipur was basically off limits unless you were going to come as a tourist for a couple of days. Myanmar was completely off limits, the western Chin state in Myanmar. But I thought maybe if I got some funding to go to Bangladesh, I would be able to work with some of the languages spoken in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, which is a very small area. I usually say it's about the size of the US state Delaware, which is one of our smallest states, maybe even smaller than Manipur. It's a very rich ethno-linguistic picture there. There's about 12 indigenous groups, including some who speak languages related to Bangla, like Chakma and Tongchenga. And then the rest of them are all Tibeto-Burman languages belonging to about 4 or 5 different branches of the Tibeto-Burman family. So extremely rich diversity there. So on landing in Dhaka, I got some funding to go. I got a Fulbright to go and spend several months there. And on landing in Dhaka, I went to the nearest and most important educational institution, the University of Dhaka, where there's a linguistics department. And at that point, it was 1999, there was only one institution in Bangladesh that had any kind of linguistics. There were a couple of anthropologists at Chittagong University who had some background in linguistics or who had studied linguistics when they were getting their degrees abroad. But the only institution with any linguistics is, well, it was and kind of is, but now Chittagong University has some linguistics. So I went to the chair of the department. Of course, I got an audience with the chair. It was no problem. But I said, who here is working with the indigenous languages, all these languages that you have down in the southeast part of the country? And there are actually 40 languages in Bangladesh as a whole, besides Bangla, that are we can call indigenous. And he introduced me to one graduate student who was working with the language Marma, which is from the standpoint of language endangerment, probably the least endangered language of the Chittagong Hill Tracts. So it's got hundreds of thousands of speakers, not many hundreds of thousands, maybe 200,000 speakers, and it's got a well-established writing system, and it's used in all sorts of domains, religious domains, and just not a language that's at all endangered. I was more interested in the endangered languages, and nobody was working on anything there at Dhaka University, so I just got on the train and went to the field myself, and met community members and started working with these languages. And I was working on them for a couple of years in the early 2000s, and I decided that if I was going to have colleagues to collaborate with in Bangladesh, I was going to have to grow them myself. And so as the first part of my attempts to do this, I obtained funding to teach a couple of workshops at the University of Dhaka from the National Science Foundation as a part of a much larger project working on language documentation of a number of these languages. And so in 2004 and 2006, we held workshops. Fortunately, the chairs of the departments at those times were helpful in doing this, and just make sure it's not a wildcat, right? And also one of the professors in the department, so Janat Imtiaz Ali, who later became the head of the director general of the International Mother Language Institute, and in the anthropology department, Hassan Al-Shafi, who was, I don't believe he was chair at the time, but he was extremely supportive of this. And so actually the first workshop in 2004, I had the idea that maybe not only linguists would be interested or able to do this work, but maybe anthropologists ought to be brought in as well. And so I kind of divided the class between 6 seats for linguists and 6 seats for anthropologists, and made the linguists and the anthropologists talk to each other a bit. And so we spent about 3 or 4 weeks in Dhaka for that workshop, and we then took a week to go down to the main place that I work, a town called Bandarban in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, right in the middle, and I set them to work with speakers of languages, trying to do the kind of basic documentation work that we do, or that we did at that time. Right? So the kind of documentation that there was in the early 2000s was not the kind of documentation that you have nowadays with fancy video equipment and lots of cables and other things that we all make use of nowadays, just as a matter of practice. But we had tape recorders, and they would make recordings of stories, and they would first they would try to figure out the sound systems of the languages, and there were enough languages there that I could put them to work on 6 different languages, and so we would gather together every evening and compare our notes. And so the point of this was to, first of all, raise people's awareness of the issues, so make them understand there are these languages out there that need attention, and communities that eventually may ask for us to help them, and also to get people to the stage where they could maybe go abroad and get further training, because it is possible to get a PhD in linguistics at the University of Dhaka, but they don't have the personnel, or they didn't have the personnel on hand to train people in doing the evolving kind of language documentation that we now do. So there was another class in 2006 And then in 2012, one of the students from the class of 2006 was teaching at another university, a private university, East-West University, and he organized a shorter workshop for me to teach there of a couple weeks in length. Actually, all three of these have yielded some results in terms of the people that have come from them. So from the University of Dhaka classes, 2004 yielded a number of people who are now professors at the University of Dhaka and who I can call on to do various things to assist me in my own research there, in particular helping with dealing with the visas and things of that nature. And hopefully they will also, in the future be supportive of other things that I undertake in terms of language documentation. The 2006 class produced 2 students who went on to get PhDs abroad in linguistics. The class of 2004 also produced one anthropology student who continued to work with the community that he began working with in my workshop and still works with them, and Bokhtiyar Ahmed. He's now an anthropology professor at Independent University of Bangladesh, and he is spearheading an effort there to do language documentation, basically. The 2006 class produced 2 PhDs in linguistics proper, which were documentary. Let's see, we'll come back to that slide. Mohammed Mustafa Rashal just last year finished a grammar of Tripura. So this is a PhD dissertation of several hundred pages in length, 300 pages, 400 pages, with supporting documentary linguistics materials, which either are or will be deposited in archives for that language. Before him, Mohammed Zakaria wrote an excellent grammar of Hyo at Nanyang Technological University, and he is a consummate language documentation person. He really understands how to do things well, and he has a very artistic eye. His materials are really nice. And just a few days ago, Mohammed Zahid Akhtar received word that his dissertation has been accepted, and that's a comprehensive description of Pankwa. So these are 3 of the languages that I was working on there. Well, no, 2 of them that I was working on myself. I wasn't actually working on Tripura. It wasn't on my to-do list. There are also future PhD students in progress from both the 2004 class and the East-West University class that I taught. So let's see, anything else I want to say about that? My former students have also organized organized workshops of their own. So the International Mother Language Institute called on Zakaria, the fellow who wrote a grammar of Hyo, to teach language documentation workshops for field workers that they were sending out to work on a project they had called the Ethno-Linguistic Survey of Bangladesh. And Mohammed Mustafa Rashal at his university, Daffodil University, it's a private university. Just this last fall, he took a batch of students to Bandarban, just as I took him to Bandarban many years ago. And he plans to do it again in about a month. It was so popular. So Hazika, you're talking about visibility. I mean, visibility is a really important thing as far as language endangerment is concerned. So let's see. So the International Mother Language Institute recently underwent a change of its directorship, and the director made it known to me that he was interested in working together with me, and I've pledged my support to helping him make Emily do the kinds of things that I think it ought to be doing, which is being an archive itself, and also training people to do language documentation and so forth. So I just a couple of months ago taught a workshop to the personnel at the institute there, because it's this large building in Dhaka where there are many people who aren't linguists at all, who don't have really any connection to language. They're just functionaries, but they need to understand what the goals of language documenters are. And I expect in the future I'm going to have other collaborations with the International Mother Language Institute. In particular, the one thing the director is interested in, or was interested in when I was there last fall, is he wanted to put together a set of guidelines for language documenters. So again, Hazika, you were mentioning that yesterday in your presentation at the panel. When he suggested this to me, I said, well, we kind of already have this, right? So linguists, the emailed people have put together, guidelines, and also at Corsol you have your different modules, which is a kind of a language documentation tutorial. So things like this already exist, and maybe what we need to do is just have some established international resource for this. I don't know, maybe UNESCO could figure out where to put it, and then it could be be housed there, and then we could update that, because updates are. It seems like things are static at the moment, or fairly static for the last few years in terms of technologies and in terms of best practices, but. As those evolve, then maybe we need something like that that is controlled, not at an American level or at a UNT level, but at a more international level. So projected obstacles to success for the academic side of things. There are, I've grown my colleagues, so I've got people that I can collaborate with now on various things, and all the time I've been kind of thinking, we need to kind of change the way people think about linguistics in Bangladesh from within. And I have people to do that now, but it's difficult for people to get positions in the right places. So the way academic positions work in Bangladesh is complicated, and I don't pretend to know the details of how it works, but it seems to me from the outside that there's a lot of politics involved. And so if somebody has not got the right contacts in the institution they're trying to get a position in, then they're just not going to get it. And so even though these folks have gotten their PhDs and they have excellent dissertations and publications, they aren't going to be placed in institutions like the University of Dhaka, which is the most powerful, or the University of Chittagong, which is the second most powerful. They could get positions, however, in good private institutions if they become available. So Mohammed Mustafa Rashel, who has a position at Daffodil University, I think he's actually quite happy. And a couple of days ago, he received word that he's been funded to set up an institute there at Daffodil for work with indigenous languages. So we'll see how these things go, but hopefully there won't be lots of problems there. So I do want to say a bit about community contexts and capacity building there. So it's, comparing Bangladesh, the community situation, to Northeast India, it's as I started to say at the beginning of the presentation, it's very different, right? So we just came from Ciil, which is this incredible gathering of linguists who are, linguists, Indian linguists who are, not from the Northeast or who are from the Northeast, who, are maybe not native speakers of the languages that they study, but they have been interested in them for a long time. And, there's a long history in India of linguistics being interested in the linguistic diversity in the languages. I mean, that doesn't exist in Bangladesh. And, like I said, when I first went to the University of Dhaka in 1999, there was nobody on the faculty there interested in working with indigenous languages. Now that's changed a bit. Hopefully You know, I've helped to raise the visibility a little bit, and so people are interested in it. But the communities are very different in Bangladesh. So it depends on the community. Some communities are highly educated, and they have activists who are empowered, but many of the communities are not that way. So I think much more here in India, communities understand that they have rights, and they, you know, they ought to be able to work with linguists to document and to revitalize or maintain their languages. In Bangladesh, there's not that awareness. People just don't know that there are linguists out there that they can call on to work with them. So I want to say a little bit about language documentation before and now. So when I first went into Bangladesh in the late 90s and the early 2000s, I mean, obviously we were not going into the communities to do bad, right? We were, you know, I'm sure all going in with good intentions, and if the community wanted us to work with them about something, then, you know, to make dictionaries or to make pedagogical materials, I'm sure we would have been happy to, you know, to rise to that occasion. Nowadays, it's pretty much the expectation that language documentation projects should be pretty much community-driven. I mean, it's almost, you won't get funded unless there's a very clear interest on the part of the community, and you have to, you know, show that in your grant applications and so forth. So, for my first grant from NSF, I you know, didn't have to show that there would be any community involvement. And obviously I work with the communities, but the communities are just not that interested in doing anything yet. The second time I had to show, you know, more of a commitment to the community. And so for Ringmicha, this language I mentioned yesterday, which has only 5 speakers remaining, I did my best to, you know, come together with the community. We had a couple of workshops at the beginning and at the end of the project to, you know, raise their awareness about I mean, they know their language is endangered. It's obvious. I mean, their children haven't learned it for 2 generations. So, nevertheless, this community probably will not maintain its language, frankly, because it's, you know, just it's very cumbersome to teach the language to 2 generations removed. Yeah, so there are lots of obstacles to language maintenance in the hill tracts. And it's, you know, not just the fact that there aren't speakers of the language anymore. There is a lack of community organizing committees. So here in Northeast India, every language has a literature committee, basically, right? And in Bangladesh, that's much less the case. There are a few communities in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. I can't say so much about the plains languages, so languages in the northern part of Bangladesh. They, in some cases, I think are a little bit more organized at this point. There's maybe 2 or 3 languages that have literature committees. There were some efforts by IMLI to have committees which would work towards mother language education, but not for all of the languages, only for some of the larger of the smaller languages. Financial resources. So people can't be expected to in these communities, people can't just be expected to do things pro bono. They're not at that point yet where they are financially secure and they don't have to worry about making money, and they can you know, devote a lot of their time to proofreading a dictionary or going around and recording people. And things that we were talking about yesterday in the digital panel I'm not sure what the title of the panel was right now, but so in these cases, you know, many of the speakers of these languages don't have access to education, and they don't have access to the internet. They don't have smartphones even. You know, there's no internet coverage in many places where the languages are spoken. So a lot of the things that we were talking about yesterday are at the moment not really relevant for them yet. And you know, these things will change. So at some point, you know, there may be members of the communities which become more activist in nature, and then hopefully there'll be lots of linguists in Bangladesh waiting to work with the communities that need them. So I think I'll stop there, and I don't think you're asking me questions now. Maybe we're waiting to the end. But if you have any questions, please.
The panel coordinator is not here, so I think it's our responsibility, all of our responsibility to take charge of the situation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm taking this out because it's
I
causing
think
my
as per this
issues.
invitation, as per this schedule, we also have Ciil.
Yeah, Centilla requested that she don't want to be part of it, so she's coming in later.
Yeah, then
So-
we also have Shiram Rajketan.
Yes, he was one of our core organizer, but due to his mother's this thing.
All right, so on behalf of Somi, I would like to initiate the discussion. I think that's better because people may have certain things to.
Shobna, if you can add any more to the panel, then we can.
I'll just do discussion.
Yeah, okay, no, we will all add, of course,
Okay.
that's what is the point of discussion. So basic idea is, it started with Somi's ideas of what we can do in future. Like this is the beginning of the Listener Festival. What we are seeing here, a few of us should multiply and multiply. And maybe we should see more collaboration in all aspects, that is the whole idea. And we also heard from Ezekiel about the immediate goals of UNESCO and the long-term goals. And there are, of course, many other objectives which are laid out in the Global Action Plan of UNESCO. And we also heard from David about his experiences in our neighboring country, Bangladesh. That's also very important to know the situation of our neighbors because we are living in a global village now. And we are now talking about so many things, digital resources and other things, but we also had a cat entering our session. So this is the diversity we have here. So in such a situation now we have to see how are we going to take this forward. UNESCO is also thinking of promoting more programs of IFA, if I may speak on your behalf. Information for all program, because that's the response UNESCO suggests in order to address the issues of lack of electricity in many places in Bangladesh or even in Northeast India. It reminds me of a village I had to take my field students, which was in Reboy district, a village which speaks Manar, M-N-A-R. That village has absolutely zero electricity. Even though you said you had to go in 90s with pen and paper, despite having digital recorders with us, if you do not have an electricity outlet, you are not going to be able to charge them and do the recording for hours and hours.
Don't carry batteries.
Yeah, but we like how much you would carry, and we were training students of 35 students in field linguistics, and so our goal was to stay for 5 days. But each time we would run out of charging, even the charged batteries would die, and we had to go to the nearest village only to charge our telephone. We were out of telephones, but it was a nice experience. After the 5th day, we come out in the bright light. We thought, where are we? Something a new world. So of course, but there are many such obstacles when it comes to India. But nevertheless, we need to do some kind of walk extra miles in order to get some things done. That's the whole idea. Now, with this little note, I would invite others to say a few words and add to this. Yeah, maybe we start with Shobhana. If you want to come here, because they are recording.
Do I need to come in?
They are recording, so if you otherwise they can turn the camera to you. Yeah, you can just sit there. You can turn.
All right.
It's your wish. He's in it.
Oh, now that I've gotten
Yeah.
I don't have anything large to say, but I can, since it's a discussion, then I'll just bring up some points then. There was a question, I think Ezekiel and I had spoken about putting guidelines together, and then I heard you mention again, putting some guidelines together. I think this warrants like a larger discussion, because I'm a little wary of, or I think we need to discuss it, because I'm wondering if universal guidelines, whether they need to be really just guidelines and not specifics. Emailed what David had mentioned, the electronic metadata for language documentation or something like that, emailed, was used for many years by linguists, but by the end, it was used for like 5 years really well, and after that the technology's changed a lot, but people were still going back to that and using it. So when you put something in for technology, it has to be something that's changeable, and adaptable, and updatable very quickly. And it may not be appropriate for all places, like you're saying. Some places have no electricity, and a lot of people are now documenting with their phones, and I'm wondering if there's a way of promoting best practices for documenting with your phones. A lot of our students are doing it because everyone has phones. Community members have phones. So there's things that we need to think about that are not appropriate for all people, but maybe for South Asia there's a specific set of concerns. So I think putting this together and with the UNESCO stamp would be awesome. That would be amazing. A lot of people will read it and they'll use it, but we need to discuss it a little bit further. And I would definitely be interested in being involved, as I'm sure we could get a set of people together.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to discourage people from making any kind of documentary materials.
No, they should, but if we think about it ahead of time, then maybe we can have. So we had discussed maybe having a picture book with a few things, and then having something online that people could then refer back to. So the online portion could be updated, and the handbook or the postcards or whatever we had discussed, that could be just more generic. So if you have a production team, we could do a good job. That's the problem. It's going to take some effort. Did anyone want to say anything about materials? I don't know if any of you looked.
I think Ciil is one of the institutions that could add to the material productions what you're talking about. Do I need to come there? I asked you. You asked me. And maybe. Oh, on my back. Here. On my back. Okay, all right. Now see, we are also Lindra is also here. We are from Center for Northeast Language Development, housed in Ciil. This is actually our center is supposed to carry out most of the activities related to language document in this part of the world, in this part of the country. So I think we plan to resume our activities, and let us see if we want to come out with a handbook of guidelines and best practices of language documentation, also for language description, because that's also there, but primary focus is language documentation. That's something we can do. And how to get connected with remote communities, because we are saying, almost all of us agree that language documentation has to be community driven. We have to work with communities because they are the primary beneficiaries of our work, in addition to other theoretical insights we may get for typological studies and other academic disciplines. And for UNESCO, of course, you are interested in seeing how do you preserve and promote the languages, because the recent motto being no one should be left behind, whatever. But then the argument is how are we going to do this with the institutions, because this panel is about collaborating institutions. Ciil can definitely pitch in. I see that you guys are interested. I am also requesting you to expand your network in India. I'm sitting next to you, but I'm not connected to you.
I'm
just telling it in a lighter tone, but he knows what I meant. So So what I'm saying is like we need, because you are the guys, like she said, your stamp is important
Very
in
important, yeah.
many activities that India would be focusing. And you have a larger role because you're the advisor for South Asia, not just India. So that way it will be nice, like if you can be a wonderful bridge for us where we could just climb upon and reach Myanmar or other areas, because these are countries where many of the, I thought like one more important point I want to add is the notion of pluricentricity. None of these languages are official in any of these regions because in most of the countries these are underprivileged and they don't get the official status. That's one point. Pluricentricity, the notion of pluricentricity and multilingualism is geared towards the major languages. Like we were talking about Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese being pluricentric, or Tamil being pluricentric in India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, whatever. But these languages, they are shared across borders, trans-border languages. When you talked about Myanmar, it just reminded me, I just guided one of my PhD students on Jingpo. Jingpo is known as Singpho in Arunachal. Okay, so there are shared languages. It's important to also look into the cross-linguistic features and cross-linguistic cultures, cross-linguistic communications, what happens in their societies, connecting cultures and languages. That is something we need to do in this collaborative work. Not just Myanmar, the same with Bangladesh, but not necessarily a well-known languages like Bangla. Some other languages, even War is spoken in, War Kasi is spoken in Bangladesh. It's also spoken in Meghalaya. Likewise, you have so many Southeast Asian neighbors are very, very near and dear to Northeast people. So they are more connected with the Southeast Asia than to the mainland India. So that is always there. So I think that is one thing, because you are here as an advisor for South Asia to help us establish some collaborative scholarships across Southeast Asia.
If I could just come back to the resource building thing before we continue with that. I invite you to look at coursal.unt.edu and our collaborative digital archiving curriculum, our CODA curriculum. That CODA curriculum is not built for linguists. It's built for community members who don't know any linguistics. And it's very different from CIIL. And so we both serve a purpose, but a different purpose. And we're meeting, we're meeting the same goals, but for different people. So that's a very important distinction that I wanted to make. So it's not like emails, which is for professional linguists. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And that's the reason why I think when we discussed this, I was really, really interested in taking it forward. But I just wanted to also address the issue of relationships between institutions. We all work for, bureaucracies. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of red tape and so on in those institutions. What really cuts the red tape is activities. If we define clearly the activities that we want to do, in this case, put together a generic guideline or a generic toolkit that is supported by online material that can be updated at any moment, that catches everybody's eye immediately. But if we want to go through the official relationship between institutions, then that's where the problem starts. Yeah. I just wanted to say that if we build our scholarship, our relationships around activities, we will achieve more with less bureaucracy.
Yeah, I think that's what we want, less bureaucracy and more activity.
More activity.
That's something I think all of us agree upon that. So I think we can think about it. Yeah.
One point I wanted to make with David's, as being a panelist and discuss it, I guess. So you had mentioned creating an archive in Bangladesh, or that you had encouraged making that IMLI Center an archive. And so that's a great, to do a physical archive is a very easy, much more easy than doing a digital archive. And I think sometimes the idea of a digital archive, if it's a website, that's also easy. But a true archive really requires servers, a cold room, steady electricity, sometimes a backup server, because you can't do it on just one server, and sometimes a cleaning server, because if material is coming from lots of places, it can have corrupting influences. So it takes all that infrastructure plus the digital management software has to be updated on a regular basis because it keeps changing, technology changes. It's very, very expensive. You need a metadata editor that interfaces with the Outward portal, and that's something that needs to be either built in or you have to get it by Omeka or some one of these things, and that costs a lot of money, or you have to have somebody who builds and maintains it. So all of these different pieces can happen, but maybe not as easily as some people feel like, well, we can have a website, yes, but a website's very different. And so those things are things that we need, they're aspirational, but they may not happen right away. So that's the reason why we keep pushing back to this, or to Cidela. The Cidela model is a great one. In India, actually, all of our institutions have access to DSpace, right? They can use some of the infrastructure that exists. If people could just get to, build all those, there are 3 different pieces. There's an outside portal, metadata editor, and then the management system, and they all have to coordinate. And there are people who have put the code together on how to do that, but somebody would have to really, put the effort.
One more last thing from my side, what I want to add is because Sony is more interested in taking this with orality and other aspects of the Northeast, because that's one of the reasons we are all here. So I just would like to reiterate here, it's important to have communications with different communities and see what to do for those of the communities who do not have their languages written down. Because it's basically, there are many unwritten languages in this part of India. So how are we going to do it? Here we should also have dialogues with Northeastern Council, NEC. Again, more bureaucracy, yes, but then, but it's important we rope them in because they would be one means for us to reach the unreachable or inaccessible places where you don't need ILPs and other permissions to go to different parts, because if you want to go to several areas in Arunachal, there are restrictions. So we need the support of institutions or organizations like NEC. NEC has given us a project. Lindra, myself, and another colleague of mine, we are working on one of the most important projects, I must say, orthography development of Northeast languages. We have started with Lingam. It's not easy because you know very well from in Austrasiatic communities, there's a long-going debate about whether Lingam is a separate language or is it a dialect of Kasi. I'm not going into that discussion right now because it's being recorded. There are a lot of socio-political factors that is there. So, but we have started. We are also going to work on Varjayantiya. Many communities come to us. They seek our support. I mean, us means not just Ciil, I'm saying academicians, to develop orthographies because they want to, first thing they ask is, we want to see a dictionary. For them, it's a symbol of pride to own a dictionary in their language. So that, but they say that we cannot make a dictionary because we do not have a script. So that's something, one more thing which is something doable, but even there we need some guidelines because that's also very important task. Yeah, so I think we are running out of time now, so because we also have Changte as the next presenter and performer also, I guess.
We have like 2 performances before lunch.
So I just hand over my microphone to
no, it's
Renu. Thank you so much, everybody, the speakers and the discussants. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an interesting session going on here, and then definitely there are so many dialects and languages that are just disappearing, like even how we have even species and even flora and faunas are disappearing like that. Even languages are disappearing very fast, and it's really important to safeguard all this by doing a lot of documentation. So I will just I have Northeast is a it's a place, a threshold of so many ethnic communities. Each and every northeastern state has got different, ethnic communities, different tribes. And then I happened to, recently I happened to visit to Pasighat, and it was for a project, and I happened to encounter a young man. He was, I think, 21, 22 years old. And I asked him what is his name, and then he told me his name is Komling, and I want to share this. He said his name is Komling, and I said, what do you mean by Komling? He said, ma'am, it's actually very interesting. I got this name from my father. His father's name was something like Namkom or something. So they have this, ascending. Like he said, if I want to trace my ancestor, I can trace my name through, passing down half of the name, prefixes to their son or daughter. So if his father is Namkom, he become Komling. And if he has a daughter or a son, his name is Lingsam or something like that. So it will keep ascending like that. And I was really fascinated by this, and I just took out my phone and I started recording, whatever he was telling about this. So I think there's so many interesting things about language and dialects, and so I think the whole idea of orality culture, oral tradition we have, amidst us, I think it's really important to tap this and document this as much as possible. And I'm really happy that Tamosomi is doing great and bringing such a unique festival to Manipur and collaborating with UNESCO, CIIL, and Dartmouth University, and also Professor Somachilaya here. I met her last year in our University of Culture, where she was teaching us a workshop on archiving the languages through Corsil, with the help of Corsil, and that was very helpful as well. So it's indeed great, and I'm more into storytelling, as well as I'm in University of Culture doing my bit. Yeah, so well, it's nice, I think. So I'm looking forward to more listening, and for now, and looking definitely forward to all the even children are here who are about to do the storytelling. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to today's program. And thank you so much, Renuka, for giving me this little platform, completely out of blue. Thank you.